Good afternoon. Sorry for the delay. We're trying to make sure that you are seeing the briefing as it is being gone through without having any additional items that we're seeing on our end. I didn't want to have anybody confused along the way as we go. But welcome to the Public Assistant Applicant Briefing. This is for emergency measures only for Hurricane Ida. This is FEMA 3569. As we go along, the PowerPoint, a lot of your questions hopefully will be answered. If not, again, there will be an email address found within that will allow you to send any questions to prior to your getting a MEMA project officer or the PDMG. We'll be happy to respond to you. But if you would please mute yourselves, keep muted, and we'll get through this. Again, this will be put on to the MEMA website for review at a later time. Anybody who couldn't review this as we go along. Hopefully everybody did well with Ida. I know there is damages out there. I appreciate that you've done everything you can for your constituents in your areas, and we're here to help. So we're going to move forward with this. The emergency measures was declared on August 28th, 2021. The incident period, as noted here, is August 28th through September 1st. And the RPA deadline, that's the request for public assistance, is September of 27th this year. Again, here's the contact guidance. If you have any questions, once you get assigned a program delivery manager or you state assigned project officer, they will be able to assist you. Initially, this was opened up for just a few counties, but it went statewide. Here, again, is the email address I was alluding to that you can send your questions to prior to getting a PDMG or a project officer from MEMA. It's recovery1@mema.ms.gov. We will get forwarded any of the questions to the appropriate offices to respond. This is the amendment that moved it beyond the lower. I think that initially there was 8 or 10 counties involved, and it went statewide. So this amendment allowed for the entire state to have the ability to put in for emergency measures. I got somebody with a quick finger, sorry. So here you go, the whole map, everybody, we're allowed in. If you have any emergency measures that you did prior to the storm, you are potentially eligible to be in this program. We're going to go through a real quick public assistance to definition, applicant facility work cost. It's a pyramid. So as you know, a lot of you, we have worked together for a long time. The public assistance, of course, is supplemental financial assistance to the local government and certain private nonprofits for the response and recovery of activities required as a result of a federally declared disaster. We have been currently federally declared for a Cat B, emergency measures only at this time frame. There is, of course, as always, a cost share, 75% for the federal, 25 is going to be on either the applicant in total, or 12.5 for the state reimbursement and 12.5 for the public entity. Private nonprofits strictly will receive a 75% reimbursement. Public assistance is not, we are not assistance to the local populations for any damages to private houses. I will say that somewhere along the line, somebody got my email address, and I received an email today from an individual on their personal property, which I did ask them to contact the number on the website and or to put in their damages via the self-report. As always, this is a partnership. FEMA will manage the program. The state will work with your applicant and FEMA to ensure that smooth transition. The applicant is who's going to identify the damages, provide all the documentation. And this is a heavy documentation program. The eligibility pyramid of costs, beginning at the very bottom as an applicant, your request for public assistance gets your eligibility, then the facility, depending upon if it's, you know, how it's owned. Of course, this is a Cat B again, the work involved, and of course, the cost. It's all an eligibility pyramid. Applicants that are eligible for the public assistance program are state entities, declared counties, which this is for all counties, any city, town, village within the declared counties, any other political subdivisions of the state, school districts, water districts, and of course, the Native American tribal governments and tribal organizations. PNPs are eligible based on the current ruling of the IRS granting the tax exemption, documentation from Mississippi Secretary of State that it's a non-revenue producing entity. There are two categories of the PNP. There's one that is critical services. This is for emergency work and permanent work. Just remember, this is strictly a Cat B, which is emergency work. But critical services would be a volunteer fire department, any type of medical treatment location, power, water, sewer. We have, and communications. Non-critical, yet essential services for emergency work. We have museums, community centers, libraries, houses of worship, senior citizen centers. Those are non-critical, but just as an FYI, they must first apply to the SBA for a loan for any type of repair work. Again, this is a Cat B. To be eligible for this, of course, it needs to be a result of the declared event. It needs to be within the declared area, which is the entire state. The applicant must be legally responsible, and that there's no other federal agency that would be available to pay for any of the damages and or claims. Again, Cat B, protective measures only. The other categories of work, based on determination with the state, potentially there will be a larger disaster declared for this. I do not have that information at this time, but if it does, these are the other categories of work that would be available. As we know, with it being declared, this did allow for emergency work to be paid for. The emergency protective measures that are taken prior to, before, during, and after to save lives, protect public health and property safety, and eliminate or lessen any immediate threat of any additional damages. Part of that, of course, is the EOCs, the activation, any barricades or signs of fencing that were put up, any search and rescue that occurred, fire, flood fighting, any of the security forces, the law enforcement, police, any guards, shelters, sandbagging, emergency repairs, generators, and of course, if you had to push debris out of the road, not dispose of it, just simply pushing it off to the road side of the road, that is part of the Cat B. In order to do this, we know that it is, as I said, intensively high documentation wise. So it's going to take time. Whomever's going to wind up doing the work on this, the applicant agent, the FEMA does allow for administrative costs to be paid. It is all based on percentages, but I will say that the cost will be paid at 100%, but you must track all costs. It's going to be, again, highly paperwork documentation requirements. Eligible work involved for reimbursement if cost must be reasonable, necessary to accomplish the eligible work, cost reasonable. If it doesn't exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under the circumstances prevailing at the time the applicant makes the decision to incur the cost. You need to ensure, justify why you did it. If it seems like it may have been unreasonable to somebody, it might be unreasonable to you at the time of the occurrence, it was reasonable. That's for the justification for you to follow up with. Of course, to be eligible, you must comply with federal, state, local laws. It's authorized and not prohibited under federal, state, territorial, or government laws, and consistent with the applicant's internal policies, regulations, procedures that apply to both federal awards and other activities of the applicant. To be eligible, the reimbursement cost must include any deductions for insurance proceeds, salvage, and purchase discounts. In Cat B, you have potentially the force account labor, that's your use of your own forces. The emergency protective measures only pays for overtime, including fringe benefits. When it comes time to provide the documentation to FEMA, they will request your straight time as well on your force account to ensure the overtime fits into the system. This also will be a part of your pay policies that will be uploaded into the FEMA grants portal system that will reflect when overtime is eligible. They will require to obtain your straight time as well so they can follow through with the overtime. Any materials, any costs that were used from your inventory, any items purchased to make authorized repairs to meet the scope of work are eligible. Of course, the equipment that is used, those costs associated with the use to perform the authorized repairs or operating equipment hours are eligible. It should be supported by the labor time sheets that you're going to provide, and the rates are based on FEMA's schedule of equipment rates unless you have your own, but they must be reasonable. Funding, there is of course the thresholds for a small project. It's based on initial cost estimate, but federal shares paid upon the project approval for this disaster. The cost for a small project, the threshold is $3,320. Anything below that would not have a project written. A large project is based initially on estimated cost. Funding is based on documented actual cost. The cost shares paid when work is accomplished. The threshold for a large project is $132,800. Large projects, again, are based on actual costs. The period of performance, the time limits for project completion, which began on the disaster declaration date, which was August 28th. Emergency work must be completed within 6 months. However, if need be, it'd be the recipient, which is the state, could grant an extension for extenuating circumstances for an additional 6 months. However, anything beyond that would go to the regional administrator for FEMA, which would be on a case-by-case basis. However, I would advise you, anything that is the deadline has been reached and you are beyond it, any funding would not occur beyond the deadline date. You must be within the time frame of the time extension. There are special considerations, even with the Cat B, that are required. Although emergency protective measures are usually statutorily excluded from the NEPA review, FEMA must ensure compliance with other federal laws, regulations, and executive orders prior to funding the work. As such, FEMA must ensure the applicant's emergency protective measures avoid impacts to such resources as floodplains, wetlands, federally listed threatened and endangered species and their critical habitats and historic properties. Additional coordination may be necessary for such projects, but not limited to new construction related to the temporary relocation of emergency services, mosquito abatement, disposal of contaminated sandbags, or the construction of temporary levees, roadways, or bridges. Again, these will be reviewed with you with the PDMG and any of the potential FEMA mitigation and or environmental personnel that will work with you. But just be aware they are, that it is part of the program, even with Cat B. Insurance, again, actual and anticipated will be deducted from the project cost. All applicants would be required to obtain and maintain coverage on insurable facilities. That again will be written out in the project worksheet if we get to that, when we get to that location. Flood damage facilities located within a special flood hazard area that are not covered by flood insurance. Federal assistance will be reduced by the maximum flood insurance proceeds that would have been payable had the facility been insured. Again, this is a Cat B program. That's just part of the system we've put in for everybody to be aware of. As I noted, this is a heavy documentation record keeping process. You are required to maintain complete and accurate documentation by project for all the disaster related costs. Documentation must be maintained a minimum of 3 years after the applicant has closed out of the disaster. The record keeping that is involved with Cat B heavy is the force account labor, force account equipment, material, any equipment that was rented and or any contracts that were provided or let during the Cat B work. As I noted earlier, in the force account labor, your payroll policy prior to disaster will be required by FEMA. An applicant's benefit calculation worksheet will be requested. And your employee list of everybody who worked during the time frame that you will be claiming should include your employees' rate of pay, whether they're exempt or non-exempt employees, the timesheets and copies of the payroll records to reflect that they had been paid. And if there is any canceled checks or any proof of direct deposit, I know each individual entity pays in a different way. So just be aware we're going to require it for a reimbursement program. For your force account equipment, your equipment listing, any documentation of equipment documentation sheets, also the employee time sheets reflecting the equipment they operated, the date, and where it was used. Again, if you don't have any rates, the FEMA schedule of equipment rates would be available to you. That's a question, or you have a request for a copy, you can send it to that Recovery One email address, or once you get a FEMA PDMG or the MEMA project officer, they'll be happy to send it to you. In the force account materials, of course, a material summary record would be utilized. Any material inventory list dated prior to the disaster would be requested. Material requisition sheets, if they're available, any invoices for materials purchased and put in inventory, and copies of checks paying those invoices, of course, will be required. Procurement is a very heavy issue that everybody needs to be aware of. And the federal, state, local requirements, whichever is the most stringent, is to be used. FEMA is providing assistance with training. Listed here is a website for procurement training under the grants. It's a very good seminar series, and I would suggest that if at all possible, you have the opportunity to go take the classes to do so. Any rented equipment will require a copy of the signed rental agreement, the invoices, and of course the proof of payment, which is normally the canceled check. Throughout the process, if FEMA has any reason to determine that they're not going to find something eligible, you would wind up getting a determination memo. The determination memo would be subject to telling you why it is not a eligible item issue. You have within a time frame to appeal in writing to the state why you feel that the action as taken is incorrect. Once you get a determination memo, it is emailed through the grants portal system directly to the applicant agent and to the state. The date it is sent is the date the 60 days starts. Therefore, within 60 days, if you are going to appeal, you need to do so. Forward it to the state. The state has an additional 60 days from the receipt of your letter to forward to FEMA. And then FEMA has 90 days in which to make a determination as to the appeal. If it does not, if they find it, it is not eligible, you do have another layer of an appeal. You can appeal to the regional administrator. I'm sorry, it goes to the regional administrator. Then after that, the second appeal would go to an assistant administrator for disaster assistance. Again, if they go to a second appeal, it would come to the state. And from there, we would forward it to the assistant administrator. Time limits for applying for the public assistance grant program. You have an RPA, request for public assistance, available through the grants portal. The noted date was September 28th to have it in by. I will have an email address. I'm sorry, I'm going to have the website. There is the grants portal website. If you have not gone on to the grants portal at this time frame, would be a good time to take this address down, go onto the grants portal and register. If you have any questions, again, you have the Recovery One email account that you can send a message to, but you will do the request for public assistance through the grants portal. I've already had a couple of applicants that have put in for the request, and it will be dealt with shortly. The request is due within the 30 days of when the disaster was declared. And once we get to the point where it gets approved into our system for the request, applicant must submit all damages within 60 days from a recovery scoping meeting, which was formerly called a kickoff. So when you go through, we're going to have your request to public assistance through the grants portal. You log in, just simply click request for public assistance and follow the prompts through the system. Again, if you have not registered in the grants portal system, please, the website address that was shown shortly previously is the one that you need to go to. And if you have any questions, and if you already have been dealing with somebody from FEMA and you have their email address and you have any questions, potentially you could reach out to them and see if you have a problem, they can help you. But you have a location on your main page. It says request for public assistance. If you do not have an account in the grants portal, again, there is the email address you could send your request to. It will be worked through. If you would, please include the name of your organization, your tax ID, DUNS number, the point of contact of the person that will be dealing with this, their position, phone number, inclusive of a cell phone, please, and an email address. If there's any questions, the state will put you into the system, but if there's any questions, we need to be able to reach out and touch somebody and find out what we need to do to get you into at least the grants portal. Once you do have your RPA approved, you will be contacted by a PDMG, Program Delivery Manager, which is a FEMA person, and or a MEMA person to initiate several meetings that will occur after this. First and foremost, FEMA, they will complete what they call an exploratory call. So they will call and discuss with you the damages and or the claims that you have for the Cat B. They will introduce to you what they call a damage inventory, which is an Excel spreadsheet where you will list what your claims will be. They will discuss with you the documentation that will be required. And they will also discuss with you that they will set up a scoping meeting. The scoping meeting will occur within 14 days after this initial phone call. You will be requested to provide the damage inventory prior to this recovery phone call. This will assist them greatly for you to have already provided, if not all, at least some of the damages that you're going to be requesting payment for. You will submit everything through this grants portal, and it definitely needs to have something on this before this call. As far as the spreadsheet, it will assist FEMA as well as yourself to have this information available, move forward with getting the projects going. The PDMG, the FEMA person, will conduct this recovery scoping meeting. Again, they're going to go over the inventory, the damage inventory that you are sending to them. They're going to again discuss with you documentation that's going to be needed, any special considerations. And for the most part, a 60-day calendar. They will request probably a meeting once a week on a specific date and time to keep the ball rolling and to get this completed with a project written as soon as possible. Although we have written down here site inspections, I don't believe there will be any for the Cat B, but just be aware if there was something that would be the time frame they would discuss it. After you have the recovery scoping meeting, your project will begin to be developed by the project team. That's your MEMA, FEMA, and your applicant agent, whomever is going to be working this for your entity. A big issue is for who is going to work this for your entity. That person really should, if at all possible, really needs to be familiar with the computer, well organized, readily available. That's where these weekly meetings come into place, and understands the program elements. If they have any questions, the MEMA personnel and FEMA personnel are there to assist. But we really need somebody that can answer the phone, answer the questions, and we'll be more than happy to work with you. I will tell you that this delivery model that FEMA is using, it's been used since the end of 2017, I believe, was the first time the state dealt with it with a disaster 4350. It does demand more work on the applicant, but it does make it seamless in a transition of documentation. You will be required to upload documents into the system, and both FEMA, MEMA, and the applicant can review them and see them all at the same time. So it makes it a lot easier. It's hard in one way, but easier in another. I will say that as you go through this, you may feel like you're getting rushed to required to provide the documentation. Just be aware that this documentation is needed in order to develop your project so that you can get your reimbursement quickly. It is very imperative that whomever is going to be assigned to do this, that they make these meetings and that the documentation becomes a priority to get into the system. And I do know that, you know, you might be working with several different departments throughout your entity to get this documentation. It's very important that the documentation gets in a timely manner so we can get these completed and moved on. So in essence, you know, this currently is strictly a Cat B emergency declaration for emergency protective measures. Again, this is a reimbursement program. All counties in the state are eligible for this program. This PowerPoint presentation will be uploaded. This has been recorded. It will be uploaded onto the MEMA website. If you went on today, you will see there's a tab that says Hurricane Ida. It will be within that tab that you will find this process. MEMA contacts, Executive Director Steve McRaney, Clayton French, Deputy Director, Mike Seiler as the Public Assistance Officer for the state. He is the Office Director for Recovery. If you have any questions or you want to email them, you can do so. So just as a roundup, again, this is Public Assistant Applicant Briefing for the Hurricane Ida Emergency Protective Measures only, FEMA 3569. Any RPA that you are going to be doing, please complete it before September 27th. If you have any questions concerning the grants portal, please use the recovery one at mema.ms.gov. If you already have somebody that you have worked with at MEMA and you have an email address, go ahead and you can email them, but be aware that the recovery one is the best one to go through at this time frame. This concludes the briefing. And if you have, again, any questions, recovery one, thank you for your time and attention. I hope everybody does well and has a good day. Thank you.